So Martin Scorsese is one of the greatest film directors of all time who has kind of been an on-off Christian throughout his entire career. He openly says that Catholicism played a formative part on his life, but the fruits of that are only in part evident in his filmography. Scorsese has used filmmaking in order to depict debauchery and violence in all kinds of graphic ways. But then there's his Christian film, Silence, that is actually one of the very best Christian films that I've ever seen. This cinematic exploration of faith and Christianity is really one of the deepest and most spiritual films. Silence is set in the 17th century about two Portuguese priests who travel to Japan in an attempt to locate their mentor, who is rumored to have committed apostasy and propagate Catholicism. This is a movie that is a really hard watch with a lot of torture scenes, difficult subject matter, and an overall quite depressing atmosphere. This movie has actually a lot of characteristics with a horror movie because there's a lot of violence, scary parts, shocking parts, and a persistent tension that becomes even more intense the longer you watch the film. This is actually one of the least successful Martin Scorsese movies, but it's a film that's been highly appraised by Christian and secular audiences alike. I, for one, saw this film back when it came out in 2016. I wasn't a believer, but I was a huge Martin Scorsese fan, and I was quite confused and disoriented, and I didn't know what to make of Silence. It's such a long movie and such a torturous watch. But my biggest issue watching this film before coming to Christ was I didn't get what this film is really about. Now, I recently rewatched it after coming to faith. First thing that struck me with this movie was just how Christian it really was. Like, there isn't a single scene that isn't about Christianity or about faith and the exploration of that. And I actually do feel that this film is made for a Christian audience, just because I don't know if you would get the reasons for the tension of the film. If you're far from your faith, you wouldn't really get why the characters are putting themselves through all of this. Of course, from a story point of view, you might be, but not really from an emotional or deeper psychological point of view. And this is a brilliant example of when Hollywood uses Christianity not as a stylistic or aesthetic thing, but actually deeply explores it as a theme. And you can't actually do that if you're looking at it from the outside in. You have to kind of be on the inside and be a Christian who is a filmmaker, the way Martin Scorsese is. You might watch this film and say, don't get why the filmmaking is so great, because it's really a subtle film in its style, especially compared to other Martin Scorsese movies. And please look closely into this film and you will recognize how brilliant the filmmaking is. It is distilled, it is very minimalist. Just the framing and the way the shots are selected. When do you see something from a wide angle? When do you see something from a close-up? Like, these basic filmmaking questions are really what Scorsese has perfected over his career, and Silence definitely marks a very specific point in his career that I'll talk about later. And I just love when filmmaking gets as good as this. The screenplay is absolutely fantastic. There are many dialogue scenes in this film that are really deep, and I just love how closely the film pays attention to even the smallest characters. Like, every gaze, every action that a character does truly counts in this movie. And it's a film that really asks us the tough questions, like, what value does the Christian tradition have, and how the material aspects of Christianity come into play when you are saved by grace through faith. It's about what true faith really means and what role our decision play in influencing what our faith really is made of. There's an absolutely amazing dialogue scene. First time you see Liam Neeson in the movie, or one of the first times, maybe 2/3 into the movie, he has a dialogue scene with Andrew Garfield. And this scene right there, like, the lies that are being presented to you, how they are mixing with the truth, the kind of manipulative ways in which the screenplay is written, is just, I mean, that's just great screenwriting, and you can really break down the conversations in this film on a very high and nuanced level. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about this dialogue scene alone maybe the most powerful and best scene in the whole film is when, at a crucial point for Andrew Garfield's character, we hear the voice of God or the voice of Jesus. And when I first kind of saw where this scene was going, I felt a little bit of cringe. But then I just listened to how delicate and how beautifully written this voiceover of God's voice was. And in combination with what you get to see on a visual level in this scene, I mean, all of this truly just left me speechless. It was so great for me as a Christian film fan, because seeing how Christianity is really deeply talked about, at the same time the medium of film is used in a very deep way. Like, both of these things at the same time, you rarely get to see this. And like, this is just so good. Let's talk a bit about Martin Scorsese's faith and kind of his relationship to Christianity. Nowadays, he openly talks about how Christianity has been foundational to him and that he's a Catholic, but it is really obvious that he hasn't been that way throughout his whole life. Scorsese has really been an on-off Christian throughout his career, and after reading several interviews where he talked about Christianity, I just got the feeling that he really is a pick and choose Christian. Like, some aspects he believes in and other aspects like he doesn't care about. And I gotta say, I honestly don't care about what kind of faith and what kind of Christian Martin Scorsese truly is. What I care about is his output. Like, what does he put out into the world? And matter of fact, he has used his talents to make some of the greatest films ever made, but at the same time films that you as a Christian aren't able to watch without committing sin. And I think this is very problematic when you look at his filmography, and people kind of have this perceived notion of Martin Scorsese is a Christian, but his filmography has more violence and more evil and more debauchery in there than other secular non-Christian filmmakers' filmographies. And many of you also know that he has made quite a problematic and controversial film about Jesus, where I guess he tried to explore his Jesus human side, but ultimately really they ended up with an artistic interpretation of the Gospels that are far away from the actual Gospels. And Scorsese tried to make Silence right here for 27 years. And if you look into how many times he almost made it, and then decided to do other films where he depicted like absolute craziness, it's really peculiar for me. That being said, look into his filmography and you'll see that his filmmaking has definitely changed after making Silence. And he talked about how the making of Silence has had a profound effect on his faith and his walk as a Christian. Like, ever since making Silence, he has made 2 feature films, The Irishman and Killers of the Flower Moon. Both of these films are slow and thoughtful and long films that don't really have anything in there that is problematic to watch as a Christian. And I really get the feeling that now, I mean, Scorsese is an old guy. He only maybe has a couple of years, maybe 10 years in the film industry, like actively making films left for him. And I think it's interesting that late on in his career, he finally decided to only make films that go more hand in hand with his Christian worldview. But still, I can't really praise him as being a Christian filmmaker, because he spent like decades on decades creating movies that Christians can't really see without sinning, and putting just imagery out there that is really went into unnecessary extremes, while at the same time like being a really talented filmmaker. Like, for me, it goes both ways and I can't separate one thing from the other. Coming back to Silence right here, this is a truly Christian film, probably even the best Christian film that I've seen so far, specifically when it comes to the depiction, exploration of faith on film. The message of the movie, I'm not gonna give it away, but it's been really controversial for a lot of Christians, but I think ultimately it's so beautiful and truthful and comforting, especially when it comes to the persecution of Christians. And this film really gives hope to all who kind of struggle with their faith. And this is at the same time a movie that really brings a lot of pressure on you as a Christian while watching. It does ask you, make yourself ask the hard questions. And I do think this is an important watch that really shows how important it is to put pressure on ourselves as Christians and really look at where our personal faith is at. And ultimately, it's a testament to films that through this kind of serious exploration ultimately do bring us closer to God and not further away from God. I do think as a Christian that this is what filmmaking should be used for. All right, guys, this is from my review of Silence. What do you think about this film? I'm really curious to hear your opinions on that. I thank you so much for your time and attention watching my video right here. And I wish you all a blessed day and hope to have you back in my next video.